Marx was he was an alcoholic, I believe.
Yeah.
Didn't have a job. Or
unclean, wouldn't bathe. He thought bathing was bourgeois, had boils and warts and all kinds of like skin conditions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Prolific writer.
Very prolific writer.
Okay.
Let his kids die of exposure.
How did he, but wrong about a lot of things. Let's be clear about that. Like we mentioned, machinery does not increase productivity. Like that's blatantly wrong. Obviously, there's many other things in here that
humans
are
are not inherently socialist.
How did he propagate these ideas? Why have
the irony is he didn't. Not very well. He wrote, prolifically. He got chased out of Germany for being a rabble rouser. He did some actual activism too. He didn't just write. He was basically kind of like a low-level Antifa philosopher thug. He got chased out of Germany. He went to Paris. That's where he wrote that thing in 1844. It's called the Economic Philosophic Manuscripts. He got chased out of France, ends up in London. Well, the tolerant Brits didn't kick him out. He's buried in London. I visited his grave actually and pretended to pee on it. I have a standard. Like people got mad. They're like, "Why didn't you really pee on it?" I'm like, "I'm in public, man. I'm in public. I'm not just gonna whip it out and go." But anyway, I've got this iconic picture of me looking like I'm peeing on Marx's grave. But they didn't kick him out. But the thing is, his ideas did not catch on. He was not very successful. They were the short answer to how they were continued is secret societies. Okay. And this all gets sounds like tinfoil hat stuff, but it's all, you can look it all up. It's historical. There was this, kind of secret occult society is very famous in Europe called the Rosicrucians. They ended up having this kind of rival gang of, secret society. This is why it sounds funny. I'm telling you, they were really called the Illuminati. And the Illuminati was this like French, German, mostly German, in that border area group that was opposed to the Rosicrucians. And they came up with this plot to kill the king and take over power. Turns out the courier, the guy running the message to the other group of them or whatever, gets hit by lightning on the way, dies. Everybody's like spiritual, spooky, superstitious. So they think, well, can't touch the body. So the authorities actually get the body unspoiled, and it's got a charter of the membership and the plan to kill the king. So, well, they cracked down on that, didn't they? And so very few of them lived. They went off. The ones that did fled to France, and they got incorporated in this thing called the League of Just Men or the Justice League or something like this. And they were kind of precursors or fellow travelers, I should say, really, with the Jacobins. So that's the same characters in the French Revolution. It's the leftists. And that the League of the Just eventually became called the Communist League. And they took up the communist philosophy, and the Communist League eventually paid Karl Marx to write the Communist Manifesto off of something he was already writing, which was called the Communist Confession of Faith. So it's a religion. Engels had him rename it, and they made it into the manifesto. But these secret societies that thought these might be useful for revolutionary activity, maybe it's organic kind of Antifa type things. Yeah. Maybe it's, wealthy people who know that when they need to cause problems so they can have a coup, they know who to keep it going. So Marx writes Capital in 1867 until 1917. So it's do the math, 60 years later, 50 years later. I'm a mathematician, I promise. 50 years later, Lenin puts Marx's ideas into practice with a twist, his so-called vanguard model, where there's now an enlightened bourgeois class that's going to overthrow, and then they're going to teach all the stupid peasants to become socialists instead of having the uprising from the bottom. And that's when communism became popular, because now you've had a humongous political revolution in a giant country that's massively industrializing very quickly, and that's a major force in World War I and World War II. And so that Marx was largely obscure, trafficked in dark corners of intellectual currents until somebody got Lenin hopped up on it. And there are reasons why Lenin got hopped up. And he's a psychopath in his own right, but the Tsar killed his brother, so he had a grudge. There's all this stuff that goes into it. And so until Lenin made it a force on the world stage, Marxism didn't really go anywhere. Marx would have been a footnote. Was
Lenin then using Marxism as like an implement to try to create, obviously he was a demagogue. would assume would be an apt description for him. Was he trying to use that to create the state religion centered on him?
Yeah, probably. I think so.
Okay.
It was a very effective thing to go around to peasant societies, which is funny because it's not like what Marx said. It's the opposite of what Marx said. And tell them, I'll give you bread and land. And so it became a very effective campaign slogan, but for him and the Bolsheviks to be able to gain peasant support and be able to overthrow the Tsar, who was not promising them bread and land.
Right.
And couldn't deliver it either. Wow.
Okay, so then to tie this back into wokeism a little bit, you have, I guess Marx was describing a bourgeois class that used a system of classism.
Yeah, classism.
To oppress the proletariat class.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the upper class good, lower class bad.
Lower class bad.
Yeah.
Which is a very low resolution depiction of reality, by the way, because, you know, obviously
it's super black and white.
Libertarians think in terms of acting individuals, which I think is very useful. But if you think in terms of classes, it's like you introduce all this arbitrariness, right?
Like come back to the idea it's a cult religion.
Right.
Where the spiritually good, spiritually bad, the end.
Exactly.
Good versus evil.
Exactly. Yeah. And so you're just putting people in buckets arbitrarily, and then it's ripe for propaganda at that point. I love the definition of propaganda, that the purpose of propaganda is to make one group of humans forget that another group of humans is human, something like that.
Oh, that's a really good
one. So you just put people in these buckets, and then you're like, oh, demonize, kill, destroy, whatever. So you have this class consciousness thing that Marxism creates to justify its acts of oppression, and it's identifying its enemy as capitalism, I guess.
Yeah.
Basically, okay.
Yeah, because Marx didn't want to get a job. I'm telling you, that's what it all comes down to.
That's crazy.
He didn't want to be productive. He wanted to be rewarded for the bullshit he was doing.
Right.
That's the disease at the heart of so many of these academics. They're doing something that's not actually productive to most people or very many people at all.
Right.
It doesn't justify the amount that A, they get paid off, and but B, the level of intellectual narcissism some of them have, that they're making the most important contribution to the world, and now it's not being rewarded. And so they flip out. And that's like the bug underneath.
Right.
The psychological bug underneath people like Marx. He wasn't being recognized for his genius.